Well, thanks very much for inviting me, first of all. David Harvey, now at the Aarhus University, and I noticed the font has come up in a very strange way. That's not really maybe I should suggest that as their new logo. It's a funky looking AU. But I guess it's a bit different in a sense to the other ones, because I'm going to be talking about research I haven't done, and I haven't really done a lot of research on this yet. Maybe this is a nice way to lead to this afternoon, talking about what we're thinking about doing. Because it's something that I don't really know a great deal about yet, I guess. But I'll say a little bit about where I do come from. Over the last few years, I was very, I suppose, a bit cross and put out by some of the sort of commemorative events in the UK, the Lights Out movement and the event and the poppies and so on. And in terms of my background, working with James Wallace, who some of you will know already, on the book The Commemorative Space of the First World War Historical Geographies text, and also with the refocusing perspectives, working with the Royal Photographic Society at different ways that people commemorate the First World War. That's my background, but really, with an intellectual background in terms of the First World War. But really, this is about me moving to Aarhus, doing my own Brexit, I suppose, last year, and I've been there for 6 months. I turned up last time. My partner got a job there first about 3 or 4 years ago. We've been travelling back and forth, and then finally I've got a job there. First time in 19 years we've been living in the same city, and so now that's my department. It's always sunny in Aarhus, and in Denmark. And I'm just puzzled as to sort of, what are the Danes doing? How is the First World War talked about in Denmark? And particularly the 2014 commemoration, the centenary of the First World War. Denmark was dominated by the 150th anniversary of the Battle of Dougal and the whole the loss of Schleswig-Holstein to Germany. And the BBC, I know, showed a programme about it, a sort of dramatisation about it. That's what was talked about in 2014, not really the First World War. The status of Denmark in the First World War, not going to do too much on the history side of things. I think there's a quote, is it Lord Palmerston or something saying that nobody understands the Schleswig-Holstein question. Only 3 people have ever understood the Schleswig-Holstein question. Someone who who's dead, someone who went mad, and I'm the other one, I've forgotten anything about it. There's some statement like that. But essentially, in 1864, these areas are sort of down almost to Hamburg, was actually sort of part of Denmark, but sort of also part of the German Federation. Bismarck marches up to have the Battle of Dougal, and basically 1863, Denmark looked something like that. 1865, Denmark looked something like that. And then after the First World War, has it got pointed? Yeah. So that's the boundary from 1864 to it was the boundary in 1914. Then after in 1920, there's a plebiscite, and the people down here, they decided this is going to be Germany anyway, so this stayed Germany. Everyone in here had a vote. Do you want to be German or do you want to be Danish? And the present boundary that goes through here, North Schleswig voted to be Danish. South, the Middle Schleswig, by about 1%, voted to be German, and the South Schleswig area voted more solidly to be German. And so that's the boundary today between Germany and Denmark, is here. And there were still German-speaking minorities in the north, and there still are Danish-speaking minorities south of the border here. And so there's this area of the present state of Denmark. Denmark, as a state, was a non-combatant nation in the First World War, but there's an awful lot of people from here who were combatants in the First World War, who were drafted into the German army during the First World War. But when I ask about it, and I talk about it to colleagues in Denmark, I've tried to find out, all you can get, there's 26,000 Danes served in the German army, but they're only the Danish speakers. Nobody talks about the German speakers who end up living in here. They ended up living, if they survived, they ended up living in Denmark, or their families ended up living in Denmark, but they don't count as Danes serving in the German army. 4,000 were killed, and it's always couched in terms using a German-minded and Danish-minded population. What does that mean, German-minded, Danish-minded population? And you read about the 26,000 Danes because they were Danish-speaking, so they wrote letters in Danish, and they signed their name using Danish Danish language, and they were always, according to the history books, they were always doing this as a conscious sort of reaction against Germanization, and they're very keen that these are Danish, as a sort of like these are Danish nationalists fighting in the German army, but there's no evidence at all. There's been quite a fair amount of work with Danish historians, and everybody suggests that the Danish soldiers within the German army didn't fight any differently to the other German soldiers. There's very little evidence that many people made the journey crossing from, well, would we hit the boundary, were there. It would have been quite easy for a lot of citizens and Danish-minded people to just move to Denmark, and not very many people did. The Germans at the start, in 1914, they interned hundreds of Danish-speaking, particularly seamen actually, around here, because they were worried about them using their knowledge of the sandbars around here to guide British troops to an invasion. But they released them all by 1915 because they figured out that this doesn't mean it didn't make a lot of sense at all. There isn't actually a lot of evidence for particular resistance towards it here, but this area here is now in Denmark, and these are Danish-minded people. There is a national monument to the Danes who were killed in the First World War. You'd think it's either going to be down in this sort of the Danish part, or the part of Denmark that was Germany, or it would be in a big place in Copenhagen. They put it in Aarhus, which is a city here, with my now home city. No German speakers up there whatsoever. It's like it's the second city of Denmark, and you end up thinking, well, is this a monument that's too contentious to put in the capital city? They're certainly not going to put it down here where there are still German-speaking minorities, so let's put it in the second city and then everyone can forget about it. And it's actually about 20 minutes walk from where I live, and I didn't know it was there until I happened to walk. This is an aerial shot, you can't, it's sort of built into the ground. There's the seas just off to the top here, and I was walking this direction when I first came across it, came up to here, and then thought, what's this? And almost fell into it. So it's actually it's a huge sort of buried basin, and I wonder what this is, looking over, and then walked all the way around and went in, and there's this great big, the monument, the Minneparken, to the Danish people who died in the First World War. All 4,000 people who were killed, 4,000 and something Danish people who were killed in the First World War. But these are Danish-minded people, not the same group as the people who were living in what is now Denmark. The German-minded people, they're not represented here at all. And there's the sort of normal repertoire you get with this. Names, so Peter Pedersen there, born in Duble in the south and died at Vauban, dates of birth and dates of death. Someone here born in Medellin and died in Boulogne, and so on and so forth. And just a simple list of names, alphabetical order, as far as I can make out. And it's the sort of standard repertoire of commemorative tropes and aesthetics and so on. So as I said, the north of Schleswig voted to go Danish, and in this area, there are several war memorials, and the different sorts. Most of them are these Minnestain sort of types of sort of stones cut out with just the names written on them. Nearly always it's the Danish names, not the German names. And I'm trying to figure this out. I have to go down there and work my way around. Some of the monuments have Danes only. Some of them have both Danes and Germans. And I think this one this is at Eggen, and this one here at Viding. And this one I think has some of it as Germans mentioned on here as well. And so German-minded people mentioned as well. In other cases, at Hurlesloe, for instance, here in the same park, there are two separate monuments. And again, buying into very different sort of architectural traditions, aesthetical traditions. The Danish one on the left here is a sort of national romantic with a local stone. I say local, it's probably a bit of, at one point it would have been a bit of what is now Sweden or Norway carried down by glacier, but there isn't any bedrock in Denmark. It's just a heap of gravel, but don't tell the Danes that. So this is sort of national romantic style Danish memorial for the Danish-minded people from the town of Hurlesloe, and in the same park, this is the German monument made out of German stone imported from Germany with a sort of more militaristic style using militaristic style of architecture, and listing the German-minded people at Hurlesloe that were killed in the war. In terms of what are the memorial events going on today, I talked to someone who went along to the 1970 or 2017 memorial, and there was a service, and it's very much a Danish national state service. There's the sort of the brochure on the time, the programme. There's a series where the people march on. The garrison commander, Bo England, is a colonel, does the welcome. They do a sort of the Hold Nude, which is the sort of like a last post type event. Then they get someone called Morgan Skjuth, who's a veteran of Afghanistan, comes and talks about the Danish military. It's very much couched in terms of contemporary Danish war experiences, Afghanistan and Iraq mostly. Then they sing Commoners Come, which I did a translation somewhere. Which is the sort of national song. You are in danger, the brave little crowd of the north. You keep your lift your arm over your army, over loving father, and give our voice the freedom to adorn our coast. God bless the north, and so on and so forth. So this is the sort of they sing that, and then they march out again. There's information about reenactment groups who from 1418. This was formed in 2013 by a group of volunteers to spread the word about life in the trenches, and they perform everyday life for educational purposes, and to schools and so on about life in the trenches for Danish soldiers. And then they will march out again, and again it's a very militaristic style ceremony. There's also in terms of Morgan Skjuth's talk, it was very much couched in terms of what was going on in Afghanistan, but there's a handout given which just told the life of two Danish soldiers, Hans Lunding, who fought in the German army, and then Thomas Dinesen, who I've got his autobiography there actually, which he published in the 1920s, who fought for the Allies. Eventually he tried to join the British army, and they were quite suspect of him, so he went to travel to Canada and managed to join the Canadian army. I think there's a story that I've read somewhere that he was allowed in because he said he was from an obscure Scottish island where they spoke an obscure version of Gaelic, and it wasn't Danish he was speaking at all, so he managed to join the Black Watch and the sort of Canadian Scottish troops. And in terms of November 2018, this was not sort of ask this in terms of what I should do. I think I'll probably go to the Minna Park because it's 20 minutes walk and just seeing what's going on there. But sometimes I'd like to go down I'd like to go down south and see what's happening at these memorials, where there's two completely separate memorials in the same park, and maybe across the other side of the German border, where there are Danish-minded people, if you want to call them that, people who speak Danish in what is now northern Germany, and there will be war memorials there. What are they going to be doing there? And it also is just in terms of other anniversaries. The 1914 was the 50th anniversary of the partition in 1864, and Bismarck's victory in 1864, and that's what at the time people were talking about in that very far, what was at the time very far northern Germany. In 1914, people were talking about the 150th anniversary of 1864. They weren't really talking about 1914. And now there's already lots of debate and lots of starting to research projects developing about the plebiscite and the 1920, because we're coming up towards the 100th anniversary of that. And I've noticed there's calls for papers and conferences and research funding available for Danish scholars to start thinking about 100 years since the reunification of Denmark, the vote, and the gaining back of that part of what was then northern Germany, now the southern part of Denmark. And we've already seen posters up around with this sort of iconic picture of Christian Christian X riding over the border on a white horse that allegedly was painted with chalk. It wasn't really white, but he wanted a white horse because it looked better on the photographs, and so they made sure it was on the white horse. And you're starting to see, I'm sitting here watching, nobody's really talking about 1918, 2020. People are starting to talk about 2020 because of the 100th anniversary of the reunification. So this has been my experience in a new country, puzzled by what's going on and how people are doing commemoration. Very different from what my own experiences in the UK beforehand. And maybe this is an open question for what do you think I should be doing next year and over the next couple of years in terms of what how the Danes or Danish-minded people celebrate or talk about commemoration.
Thank you. Thanks.